Are you doing all right, baby? No, you just seem a bit restless. Yeah, I know. It's pretty unbearable. It's too hot to even think about going to sleep, but we've both got things to do in the morning, so we have to try at least, right? Normally I'd hold you a bit closer, a bit tighter. I know you like it when I rub your back and everything, but it's too much. It's too much. I don't want to overheat. Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. It's Is there something on your mind? Or is it just a little discomfort? No, I get it. It's been a stressful few weeks. A lot of stuff going on. Oh, I'm sorry, baby. I know you've been pulling yourself thin on all sides, you know. But if there's anything I can help with, you know I'm here. So I trust that you'll let me know if there's anything I can do. You don't wanna watch anything, do you? You don't think that would help? Yeah, no, I don't really wanna go through the trouble of setting everything up and picking a movie or that's just too much. How about I read you something? Would you like that? Yeah. No, you don't have to remember anything I say. You can fall right asleep if you want. Yeah, well, I mean, I have, let me see. I've got this over on the nightstand. It's yes, it's another plant book. I know. Don't make fun of me. I'm gonna read it to you. Do you want me to read or not? No? That's what I thought. A plant book, yes. Could you hand me my glasses? Yeah, they're on your side. I don't know why they're on your side, but they are, so I'd appreciate if you could hand them to me. Thank you. Okay, let's see. No, I haven't started this one actually. It's called Thus Spoke the Plant. I've heard really good reviews about it. I mean, I bought it on Amazon and all the reviews there seemed nice too. I've seen it on a few plant Instagram pages. Yes, plant Instagram pages. They post plants and like gardening stuff and tips and tricks and all that sort of jazz. Yeah, whatever. Okay. Yeah. Who's it by? Someone named Gagliano. I kind of doubt that's how you pronounce their last name, but that's how I'll pronounce their last name. Okay. Well, I'll read until either you fall asleep or I fall asleep or we both fall asleep at the same time. I don't know. Alright. Come here. One last kiss. Okay. Yeah, that was two, but You didn't mind, did you? Okay. Do you want a foreword or not? How about a prelude? No. Yeah, we can just start with chapter 1. That's kind of what I'm feeling too. Let me see. It's actually called chapter O, or maybe chapter 0. I don't really know what the numbering system in this is. It's called Orringham. Orringham means thank you for listening in the language of the plants. It is not a word as we humans understand it, because its meaning cannot be spoken, nor can it be heard. However, we can experience it by feeling with our bodies and listening to what our ears cannot hear. When we learn to listen to plants without the need to hear them speak, a language that we have forgotten emerges. It is a language beyond words, one that does not wander or pretend or mislead. It is a language that conveys its rich and meaningful expression by bypassing the household of our mind and directly connecting one spirit to another. This language belongs to plants, and so do these stories. This story starts from the middle. The middle is a swinging hammock hanging barely above the wooden floor of a small silt hut, with its typical thatched hippie roof, which I'm telling you, I'm tired. With its typical thatched hipped roof, walls of a pastel blue color, decorated with the intricate geometric patterns distinctive of the Shipibo people of the Amazon lowlands of Peru. This is the hut of my dreams. I had dreamt of this exact place a few months earlier, back home in Australia. On the first night, I had dreamt of standing by the outside of a small hut, noticing the black labyrinthine patterns painted on its walls. The little door was open wide and the entrance pitch black. Climbing up 3 little wooden steps was all that was required to enter, a truly simple task unless one came face to face with a gatekeeper. As the yellow-green eyes of a black jaguar emerged, shimmering out of the darkness of the doorway and pierced deeply into me, I woke up. The same scene materialized on the following night, but with no feline warden in sight. I peered inside the hut and was surprised to see a fire burning in the middle of the room and a young man tending it. The firekeeper gestured me to sit by the fire to face him, and so I did. As the orange and yellow flames danced in the space between us, the man instructed me to sing. Despite my most sincere efforts, no sound ever came out of me, and I woke up. The following night, I sat at the fire with a much older man in Shipibo dress. He was grinning at me with a flicker of satisfaction in his dark, narrow eyes, as I sang a bizarre tune made of sounds I could not hear and meanings that I could not speak. I woke up that morning knowing that somewhere that hut, that man, and those strange songs were waiting for me. This is how Socoba, a tropical tree also known as Bellicocapsi, quite literally called me to the outskirts of Pucallpa. So a few months later, I set off for Peru. Almost 35 feet tall, Socoba stands tall and proud, with a crown of perfumed white flowers adorning her head, of brilliant green foliage. She breathes up high in the sky, while her feet are firmly held in a moist, at times flooded ground, just like the human she dwells with. Here, the earth secures the roots of both Socoba and the Shipibo people, and the cosmos, unconcerned by the specific nature of their complexion, inscribes itself onto their skin. The Shipibo wear the cosmic patterns of meandering lines and hidden luminous harmonies on their painted faces and bodies. Likewise, Socoba wears them as a ceremonial dress of rough, mottled bark. As these cosmic inscriptions pierce through the very skin, tasked with keeping the outside world out and all of the insides in, the worlds beyond this world emerge, percolating in to be carefully mapped out. It is at the skin that the tree and the shaman meet, a crossroad of sacred offerings where a wound is etched into the body of one to heal that of another. The Socoba tree stretches her arboreal arms to the sky, and over the Maloka, the ceremonial hut, the beautifully painted temple space where Don M., the Shipibo man I had seen in my dream, conducts his healing ceremonies and curative rituals as the Maestro Vegetalista, plant shaman for the local community. Don M. had told me that Sakoba called him that morning soon after my arrival at his home. He had heeded her call and met her whistling one of those strange tunes while swirling in the air around her torso white puffs of sacred jungle tobacco, or mapacho, as Amazonian shamans call Nicotina rustica. Sakoba had informed him of how she had come to my dreams to call me to this place to work with her. Then she proceeded to gift him some of her bark so he could prepare a concoction for me. As the highly respected planta maestra that she is, Sakoba was committed to teach me about herself as a nifty healer of the physical, as well as emotional and spiritual body. To open this plant teacher-human-student dialogue, all I needed was to follow the dieta, a time during which I was to ingest the plant regularly while in isolation, observing total sexual abstinence and an uninspiring diet of unseasoned vegetables and rice. So I drank the concoction made from her bark that night, and the following night too, as Sakoba swiftly aligned with my present and quietly befriended my past. And I drank her again and again for the following weeks of my apprenticeship, while in a hammock that swung barely off the wooden floor of the little hut I had dreamt of months before, lying in my own bed half a world away. The first time Sakoba showed herself to me, I completely failed to recognize her. The night I started dieting with her, Don M. recommended paying attention to my dreams, where she was most likely to first reveal her presence. I certainly had a good sleep that first night she came to visit, but I noticed nothing in particular that I would have associated to her, well, except for one image. It consisted of a dark blood-red background with thick black lines, a simple image that had kept popping up throughout the night. Like the intermission of bygone films were needed to facilitate the changing of reels, this image appeared like a wide screen, creating a momentary pause between one dream and the next. The following afternoon, the same image materialized on the white paper of my drawing pad with a clear message. Todas las cosas están juntas. All things are connected. I suddenly understood what Sakoba was saying. It is through blood that everything is connected. In that moment, I knew, without knowing, that Sakoba was a blood cleanser, the healer of conditions that affected the blood and the network of vessels that assure the smooth flowing of blood inside the human body. This is how Sakoba articulated her initial insights and instructed me on what I would later read in scientific literature. In fact, decades of pharmacological research had confirmed her positive effects on the vascular system. She regulates the numbers of red blood cells and oxygen-carrying hemoglobins, deficiencies of which lead to anemia, and maintains healthy blood pressure and the permeability of blood vessels, which makes her a potent healer of several inflammation-related diseases, ranging from simple hay fever to life-threatening sepsis, I don't know how to say that word, and cancer. At once, the whole situation had become absurd, hysterical, and liberating. Why invest millennia in a blind and, quite frankly, dangerous trial and error process, as suggested by most scholars, when in just a few weeks or months, one can learn about the therapeutic properties of plants straight from the horse's mouth? Why insist on denying the ability of plants to speak to us and even teach us, when that is what they have done for, well, millennia? The claim that plants have no voice and no teaching for us is rooted in ancient history, dating back to Socrates, who declared that trees could teach him nothing, but then, ironically reminded us of prophecies uttered by old oak trees, all the while resting comfortably on a soft patch of grass under the shade of a majestic plane tree on a sizzling summer's day. This schizophrenic discrepancy has haunted Western thinking throughout its history, accrediting a voice to plants and even acknowledging them as wise oracles and teachers, only to take it away in the next breath. Despite the numerous attempts to repudiate, or worse, denigrate that which sophisticated Western thinking has defined as ignorant and superstitious, a simple fact remains. The vegetal world never stopped teaching humans, reaching out to us through our dreams and visions, and we never stopped learning by listening to it. In the light of evolution, learning by listening to plants must have served us well and afforded us major selective benefits. Those who cared to listen would have been less likely to make dreadful mistakes while distinguishing which plants were edible and beneficial, because their approach was far from ignorant, being well informed by the plants themselves. Those who listened would have been able to test and apply their newly acquired knowledge straight away. Just think about it. A random trial and error approach would have taken a long time and cost lots of lives before any useful and practical information could be revealed to us. Of course, learning by listening did not eliminate the fact that the process of discovering, remembering, and sharing a vast amount of information about medicinal plants still would have been accompanied by a huge cognitive inventory of their therapeutic properties. Our mind would have had to manage this complexity, perhaps by dividing up the information into smaller morsels, sets of distinguishable qualities that best represented a therapeutic property. These classifications would have served us as powerful mnemonic devices to prop up the finite capacity of our memory. But what a relief to know that none of it could ever be forgotten. What a relief to know that these enormous vegetal archives would always be open for consultation. Plant knowledge is in and with the plants themselves, never lost, always available to those who listen. Indeed, plants seem to know us well and what we need. In some herbalistic circles, it is said that plants are willing to help us and are keen to share their knowledge with us. As plants continue to co-evolve with humans and other animal species, it is also suggested that new properties and functions for plants will emerge as new needs develop. The obvious question, then, is not so much about how, whether, or even what it is they know, but how and why they do. From a utilitarian perspective, it is, of course, valuable to know that a plant like Cecroba can be used to treat conditions that affect the circulatory system, but how does an Amazonian tree like Cecroba know about the functioning of the human body and the healing of its dysfunctions? And why would she hold such an understanding? Answers cannot be given to questions that we are not ready to ask, and at the time, these questions never even occurred to me. They materialized only when I began writing this phytobiographical account of Cecroba 6 years later. Then, like a dog with my bone, my unrelenting mind was hungry for the impossible answers to these bizarre, even unbearable questions. I simply had no idea but to think that the riddle could be solved by virtue of a merely mental workout was the real fallacy. Instead, it all happened effortlessly. As the questions emerged, the answers did too. This is when Cecroba woke me up in the early hours of the day to elucidate them, and her answer was as natural and light as oxygen. During my dieta with her, Cecroba had spoken clearly about everything being connected through blood. Now, many years later, she was unwrapping this earlier insight like a sweet candy to convey the teaching that, in actuality, mattered the most. Don M. had told me that once dieted, a plant is a teacher that will stay with you forever and keep teaching you in her own plant time. Because of that, there is no need to diet the same plant twice, and indeed, Cecroba was vibrating inside my body, moving ever so lightly to remind me of her indisputable presence. And like that first night of my dieta back in Peru, she displayed her mastery as a teacher by revealing that the wisdom is in the oxygen, and the blood is the great connector. Speaking without words, she went on, showing me how, this way and that, through the vascular system, blood carries oxygen to the main hectic hubs of the body, as well as to its more secluded and quieter locations. This is possible because red blood cells are packed with hemoglobin, whose job it is to trap the oxygen available in the lungs and transport the precious atoms into the tissues of the body, and from there to freight carbon monoxide molecules back to the lungs where they can be released. At each inhalation, free oxygen breathed out by plants enters us in all its levity and allows us to convert what we eat into energy. At each exhalation, we let go of carbon dioxide and water, which plants ingeniously combine with a touch of sunlight to make their own food and once again more oxygen. Excitedly, she continued by pointing out how we can breathe each other in and out of existence, one made by the exhalation of the other. Arising from perfect stillness, this deep breath of fresh air is the necessary movement that brings innovation and the expression of individuality, where the unique and the separate, as the plant and the human, are made temporarily possible. And this same inspired movement that generated them also unbinds them, incessantly releasing both the plant and the human into a space where the separate parts are dissolved. With every breath, then, the plant knows the human as herself. At every breath, the human becomes more plant-like than he realizes, and given the right circumstances, he recognizes how he too knows the plant as himself. Here, Sakoba vanished, leaving me in my bed to fall asleep again. How can a plant readily know us when we are hardly aware of the plantness within ourselves? The theoretical notion of a plantness reverberating within the human body has been contemplated since ancient times. Perceived through the veil of motionless even by our most brilliant minds, this plantness has seemed inaccessible and even deliberately hidden from us. Well, that is true when we try to think of it. Let me see. It is because of its unthinkability, in the sense that it cannot be comprehended in a conceptual way, that only the experience of feeling it by virtue of the patterns of information that it delivers makes it real. When we feel it, this plantness is allowed to emanate unconcealed within us at all times. What appears to be intangible and obscure otherness is unveiled as the intimate familiarity of an obvious and luminous likeness. And far from being impenetrable and distant, the plant is revealed as unquestionably open, literally. As philosopher Michael Martyr puts it, the plant, of course, does not ask what water is and has no idea of water as a distinct object. Because in her vegetal openness, the plant is not separate from the exteriority of her milieu, and as elaborated directly by Sakoba, the plant exists in a state of open communication in which the fiction of personalized boundaries collapses. In her grounded experience of life, she need neither questions nor concepts of water to know water. In fact, she does not need to ask anything at all. This is how the plant knows the other. This is how she knows the human as herself. This knowing comes from being empty, but emptiness does not reduce the plant to a passive, spiritless, and objectified materiality, and we will consider the implications of this later, but rather liberates her vitality from the pursuit of fulfillment. Already fulfilled in every moment, always realized in her full potential, the plant is completely available to know her circumstances by listening deeply. For a human being to know this way is to be, at least momentarily, free from internal inconsistencies between attitudes and actions. It means to be empty of the socially indoctrinated belief system that prescribes the boundaries of how we are expected to perceive and behave in a given situation, and that justifies our actions, even when they are unwise and out of sorts with our internal emotional and moral intelligence. As the preconceived ideas and judgments we make about the other are abandoned, we are finally able to listen to our circumstances as they present themselves in each moment. Then, as Sakoba pointed out, we are open to know the other as ourselves. This way of knowing is not ephemeral, but earthly and concrete. This availability to truly listen by feeling the other as we meet is not empathy, which bears upon the empathizer projecting and depositing himself into the other in order to rediscover himself, a form of narcissism that makes the other a sort of imaginative variation of the empathizer. Instead, knowing by deep listening has the quality of a perfect surprise, pertinent to the moment of the encounter, not conditioned by anything inside one or the other, and thus not intentionally predetermined. The openness to this deep listening is oxygenated, and the natural body, made of blood and bones, or sap and fibers, where skins and barks are no longer perceived as functional boundaries that separate the inner and outer containing us. As it emerges from and merges into the space where one encounters the other, This openness reveals our participation in the communication with each other. Because the openness of plant being consistently invites our openness to being humans, our encounter with plants confronts us with the limits of our capacity for such embodied thinking and active participation. Thus, plants come to represent the marker points of our resistance to transcend our narcissistic and anthropocentric propensities toward exceptionalism, a necessary requirement for entering such space. This was the teaching that Sakoba, the plant, had come to share with me, the human, but that was not all. So let's retrace our steps back to Sakoba and her arboreal arms stretched out and over the Maloka, with the beautiful Shipibo designs snaking across its walls, somewhere outside Pucallpa. The tapping noise of a happy beak came from the door of my hut. I opened it, looked out, and then down, and there was my feathered visitor, chest puffed up, with attitude in his shimmering green tuxedo, waiting. Pedrito, a bright green little parrot, had knocked on my door and come visiting almost every day since I had started my dieta with Sakoba. As I opened the door, he tilted his head to one side, looking up at me with deceitful timidness. He was waiting to be welcomed in. What a funny sight, leaning his body forward with his feathery arms folded behind his back like an old Zen master, immersed in the deep contemplation of life. Pedrito would waste no time trotting inside to making himself at home. After a brief inspection of the colorful pencils left unorganized on top of my drawing pad and what little else was lying around on the wooden floor of the hut, he would flutter up to sit on the rope holding one side of my hammock and wait for me to get comfortable in it. Cocooned in a reality suspended off the floor of this world but still connected to it by a few ropes, Pedrito and I would swing together across the universe of our minds. That day, we were lulled back and forth by the calming sound of his beak clicking and grinding as he fell asleep in the fold of my arm. I stared outside through the open door of the hut and across the naked space between huts, where I could see the exposed shower, a solitary rusty pipe spouting water out of the ground non-stop, which I made use of a bit reluctantly and only out of sheer necessity. While swinging to the calming sound of Pedrito in the shelter of my hammock, I stared outside past the open shower and over the loud music and the racket of human life engrossed with itself. And further, my gaze traveled across the hushed movement of an other-than-human world, connecting me to Sakoba. From my vantage point, I could see Sakoba peacefully shining in the sun as she stretched up and over the Maloka, where we were to meet in ceremony after nightfall. But Sakoba's silent and motionless appearance was deceptive. She had no intention of waiting till nightfall before bearing her next teaching lesson on the perception of reality. While in plain sight, everything disappeared for a while for me that afternoon. The noise from outside evaporated. The hut and the hammock I was swinging in dissolved, although I was still there. Pedrito also vanished, though he was still asleep in my arms. I had not moved, and my eyes were wide open, but what I was seeing was somewhere not there. Sakoba was there. "Ah, you got it," she said without words. "Without words," I asked. "I got it. What?" And then I saw the answer, a bright, shiny road. At the verge of this luminous road, I saw all the people I've ever stumbled upon. Every single one of them was there. The woman at the deli shop where I used to buy sweets and at times shoplift chocolate bars after school, a ticket inspector on a morning train that was traveling to my hometown, a neighbor whom I've only ever nodded and smiled at as I walked past with my dog, all the people who mattered to me as well as those I never thought of consequence to my life, all the people who ever loved me as well as those who never seemed to, applauding and cheering loudly, "You got it." So thrilled, so pleased, they all had converged from divergent timelines and eclectic spaces into that moment, out of sequence with time and space. I was staggered. Even now, as I recall the event, I can still feel the confusion I felt then, and at once the sensations of something miraculous happening in the underbelly of a reality we mostly agree to deny, but which I was peering into. As I recall the event, I am also aware that my words appear to carry the hallmarks of egomania, or at least a good dose of delusional grandeur, And rest assured that I did doubt my own sanity many times, especially when all these odd occurrences started. And yet I know I do not suffer from psychoses, and certainly not from a messianic complex. This is simply the event as I remember it, knowing that even my current recalling and understanding of it is likely incomplete. As I walked towards a bright light ahead, passing the crowd like the Oscars celebrities on a red carpet, Sakoba explained how each one of them played the role I had scripted for them as part of the story of me that I directed. Look at those who put their hands up to play a challenging character, knowing that you would loathe it, judging it bitterly and unforgivingly, she pressed on. See those who you thought were out to hurt you? They played their assignment roles with great perfection and infinite patience for your benefit alone. Their choice was made out of love alone, and out of this love all agreed to be part of your play, so that you could walk to this point and remember the radiance of light that is you. Overwhelmed by a profound sense of gratitude I had not known before and an intense love radiating from everyone around me, I was now sobbing uncontrollably like a small child. Every person had brought a unique aspect to my story that would allow me to express a distinctive facet of myself. Could I possibly be the one character in my life who was unaware that this was just a wonderful performance? Was I the unknowing star of my own spellbinding play? You see, child, you got it, Sakoba reassured me, while I raised my left hand up. It was not my own adult hand, but that of a child. The road of light was leading forward to the beginning, a point of origin where all timelines and dreamscapes joined. Here, each individual character merged and disappeared into the light with me, spontaneously, effortlessly. This was the space where, as Sakoba had already revealed in an earlier teaching, the separate parts now liberated, dissolved, and unified. Did you fall asleep, baby? Baby? I'll read a little bit more, just in case. It was nightfall by the time Don M. came to fetch me for the ceremony. Stunned by the bewildering events of that afternoon, my walk over to the Maloka was, without a doubt, a clumsy one. Before entering the ceremonial hut, I looked up at the Sakoba tree peacefully shining in the moonlight, just as much as she had done earlier in the sunlight. I entered the Maloka, sat down on the mattress placed on the floor for me, and cringed at the off-putting frizz of fermentation exhaled by a small plastic bottle Don M. had just opened. Homemade and organic, the content was no lemonade soda, but the powerful psychedelic ayahuasca medicina, the acrid brew he had prepared a few weeks ago just before my arrival. Mapacho already hanging off his lip, Don M. looked at me with the exact same grin I had seen on his face when I first saw him, so many months before in the dream that had brought me here. Before I could plead to Sakoba and the plant spirits for a gentle ride, Don M. had handed me a double dose of the medicina, and the potent concoction was already snaking through my body, on her way to my stomach and to the worlds beyond. The journey had been a very strong one, and had knocked me out until lunchtime the following day. It was hard to make sense of. The only thing I remember clearly was my encounter and exchange with the spirit of a pretty fern-like plant whom I had noticed was growing next to my hut. Ah, what a sweetie she was. In my journey, I saw her covered in droplets of water as if she had just been rained on. As water collected at the tips of her leaves, she extended one of them towards me. I stretched my arm out, and the droplet at the end of the shiny leaf glittered. Hanging from the leaf edge with the same excited tension of a skydiver ready to freefall, the droplet detached, free for a fleetingly moment. Oh, I must be reading that wrong. Free for a fleetingly moment. Before Landing in the soft center of my cupped hand. What if I just close the book for a second? Baby, are you awake? I'm just gonna set it down for 1 minute. Give my eyes a little break, and then I'll read some more to you.